listening to The Anthony Rogers Show.
Hey, this is Jordan Belfort, the real Wolf of Wall Street, and you're listening to The Anthony Rogers Show.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Sean Danielsen from Smile Empty Soul, and you are listening to The Anthony Rogers Show.
Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's Carol Baskin, and you are listening to The Anthony Rogers Show.
This is Shirley Phelps-Roper with the Westboro Baptist Church, and you are listening to The Anthony Rogers Show.
What's up? It's Tom from Plain White Tees, hanging out on The Anthony Rogers Show.
What's up, everyone? This is Rain from Our Lady Peace, and you're listening to The Anthony Rogers Show.
I'm Baby No Money, and you're listening to The Anthony Rogers Show, the best podcast.
This is Agent Sebastian of the Carnarks, and you are listening to The Anthony Rogers Show.
Brian Vanderark from the Verve Pipe here, and you're listening to The Anthony Rogers Show.
Today's guests are Brandon J. Riker. He is a geopolitical analyst and author of Biohack, China's Race to Control Life, and Make Drive. He is a singer-songwriter from North Carolina. As always, the best show in the universe is hosted by comedian Anthony Rogers and rockstar Sean Danielsen from Smile Empty Soul. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Here at Luxurious, we only use the best California pine trees around. Each woody oil and bond contains up to one whole tree. Did you know I hand-pick each and every pine cone myself and make it a point to find the older ones because, well, those are aged to perfection. Once the perfect tree is taken down and strategically stacked, it's on to phase 2. At this point, each pine is carefully cut into smaller and more manageable pieces. I mean, will you just look at that pile of select wood? From this stage, the BFS 9000 shreds the pines into an almost angel-soft fibrous material as shown here.
Here at Luxurious, we use quality ingredients and the freshest pine cones.
Get luxurious, my friends.
Welcome back to the greatest show in the entire universe. How are you doing, Sean?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good, man. Are you back with the Platinum Records at your house?
I'm home.
Back home with the records?
No Platinum Records, but I'm home.
Just gold records?
Yeah.
That's good. Just got the gold records showing up. I'm somewhere in Oregon for some reason. Just about to put together an escape party to get out of here. Like, I don't want to be here anymore.
It looks really nice behind you, but you have been in Oregon for like a week and a half.
Too long, about 3 days too long. And then, we have a huge show. Besides all this happening with gold records, and we want to get out of Oregon. We have a crazy show. We have a writer. If you guys can read, he wrote some books. Brandon, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being on here. I think you're overqualified, but I appreciate it. You doing that?
I don't think so at all. Thank you, though.
And then to even it out, we brought another musician. We got Nick Driver. How you doing, brother?
Hey, what's up? What's up, Anthony? How you doing, man?
Good, man. You good?
Hey, what's up, Sean? What's up, Brandon?
How you doing?
Nah, I'm doing good, man.
Cool. Well, so we're going to talk about China taking over the entire world and like a peaceful exit strategies, like more or less, is what my concern, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So it looks like China has a plan for dominating the world. And they also would prefer to do it without going to war with us. They're doing it through trade. They're doing it through technology acquisition. I'm sorry?
Land purchase.
Land purchases. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I got a question. I don't want to interrupt you, man, but I've been doing my research, man. I've been studying all of you guys this past week, and I've been looking this stuff up. I think they're going to do it through what's called the Belt and Road Initiative, right?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So the Chinese this is part of their kind of plan to take over the world without directly fighting the Americans, at least not yet. They want to weaken us They want to weaken us now, and then they want to fight us if they have to when we're on our knees, when we're not fully at capacity, which if you look at what's going on in the country right now, we are not at our strongest, and it's getting worse, not better. And so, yeah, the Belt and Road Initiative, this is their plan in China to basically link together Eurasia, that's Europe, Asia, and then also Africa and the Middle East. And they're even extending into Latin America. I don't know if you saw on the news last week, but I live in Florida, in Southwest Florida, and so about 90 miles, a little bit more away from me is Cuba, and it looks like China's trying to move into Cuba as well, pretty big. So they're trying to use trade and what's known as debt trap diplomacy. Basically, they go to these third world countries and they offer to build infrastructure, modern, advanced infrastructure. And then the small countries, of course, can't pay for it. So they get ensnared into these debt traps with China, where China basically says, yeah, we'll build this for you and we'll help your economy out. But if you can't pay for that port or that airport or those roadways, we take it over.
And then China pretty much owns them at that point, right?
That's right. That's absolutely right. And they
actually took over a port, if I'm not mistaken, in Sri Lanka not that long ago, right?
That's correct. They're doing it everywhere, actually. Now there's some issues. Their Belt and Road Initiative is not going exactly as they had hoped. The best laid plans don't always go forward very well. But the fact of the matter is that they are still having success in terms of entrapping these countries like Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, of course, is a strategic location along the Indian Ocean, which would allow for the Chinese Navy to have access beyond their shores to being able to expand their reach and power, which is exactly what this whole objective is. It's about expanding China's reach and power without having to fight anybody. They say they're doing it through trade. And so everybody likes to do business. Everybody likes to get rich. So they figure this is how they're going to trick other countries into basically becoming almost like colonies or vassals of the new Chinese empire. And they don't realize it until it's too late.
Hey, Brandon, and Anthony, forgive me if I'm over talking or anything. I'll be glad to not. I just got questions because I was like, I was looking at Brandon stuff. I was looking at Sean stuff. I got questions for everybody because I'm like, I think me and Sean might have played a show together way back in the day, but it was a long time ago. But I want to ask him about that because you rock and roll, my man. So
thank you, sir.
But Brandon, so
yeah,
the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You are the scholar on this. I look stuff up. I try to search stuff. So if I say anything, like, feel free to correct me. Because I want to know what's going on. So it used to be called Silk Road.
Yep.
Back in the day.
Yep.
And this is way back, right? So what no, I'm not on sheets, man. I ain't got to get gas right now. So but what I will say is this highway extends to ports that go all the way around the world.
Yep. Yeah. No, it basically, it's not just it's the roadways. They're basically what China's really trying to do is with the Belt and Road Initiative, which it was at one time called the New Silk Road, because that's a play on the ancient times when China was the center of the world. They linked the Eurasia and the Middle East together. It was the Chinese silks would be shipped over these land routes, and they'd end up in the Middle East and in Europe and in parts of North Africa. And so the Chinese were playing on that ancient kind of memory of China once being the center of the world. One of the reasons they want to do Belt and Road Initiative, this New Silk Road, is because they want to be able to offset the U.S. Navy's ability to block trade going into China. So basically, China is a great power, highly technological, modern infrastructure. They're doing a lot of wild stuff. The problem for them is that they are resource poor. So they have to import, I think, like 80 or 90%. It's an insanely high number of things from overseas. And they usually do this over the ocean. The problem for them is the biggest Navy in the world, the most powerful Navy in the world is the U.S. Navy. And they know in China, if they ever start crap that we don't like, our fail safe is we can just send the Navy and blockade them and strangle them. So for the last 15 years, what the Chinese leaders have been trying to do is to not be as dependent on ocean-based trade. So they're looking at building up these roadways that link China with all the rest of Eurasia. They're also enhancing the sea lanes nearest to the shorelines of China and sort of along Eurasia, but they're trying desperately to build rail lines and roadways and airports that would allow for China to not be as dependent on the sea as they historically have been, because they know that the Americans can jack them up if we really want to. And so, in fact, I just was reading an article before I came on here. It looks like that Russia is now the #1 supplier of oil and natural gas to China, outstripping even Saudi Arabia. And Russia is very much part of this new Silk Road initiative, of this Belt and Road initiative, as a partner to China. And so, what this is about is offsetting American economic power by making the trade routes dependent on China, but also from a Chinese perspective, preventing the Americans from being able to use our Navy, our sea power, to kind of mess them up if they decide to attack Taiwan or do something against India or do something against Japan. So that's sort of the geostrategic implications here of that.
Aren't they doing a pretty good job of buying off our politicians as well? Seems like that's a problem.
Well, I believe Joe Biden and his son and his whole family are agents of China, and I get into a lot of trouble when I say that.
Not here.
Well, I appreciate that. I have been, ratioed on, Twitter, and people come at me and all the bots. Even with Elon Musk owning it now, it's still, you still can't say certain things, it seems like, if you're on the right, which I am. But no, I think Joe Biden is a great example of how this country's leadership has for 50 years been compromised by China. It's not just the Democrats. There are plenty of Republicans.
It's a uniparty.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to remember, I think it wasn't Buck McKeon. It was, oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name. He used to be the head of the House Armed Services Committee. I used to work there, so I can't remember his name now. But he was the longtime head of the Republicans on the House Armed Services Committee, and he ended up going to work for a Chinese entity after he left the Hill. And this was a guy who was a defense hawk, Reagan type Republican, very strong on defense. And he went to work because they're throwing money around, and these guys leave office and they want to get rich. And so the Chinese are throwing a lot of money at them, and they're buying both parties in DC. And in some cases, it's really wild. In some cases, these Chinese entities will hire lobbying firms, American domestic lobbying firms, to then use their influence over politicians to get them to write laws and do things that benefit China, without the politicians in some cases even realizing that the lobbyist they're listening to was hired by a Chinese entity. So it's not even always knowingly. A lot of times it's sort of, they just want the money. They don't care. And the crazy thing is, if you really look at it, especially when it comes to campaign donations, it's actually not a lot of money they're doing it for. They're selling their country out for really pennies on the dollar here, which is a great deal for China. I liken it, when I write about this, I always liken it to when the Europeans came over and landed in Manhattan, and they got Manhattan and most of New York from the native tribes there for trinkets in their pockets that were worth nothing. The Chinese are doing it to us now, a little bit more sophisticated, but they're buying off our politicians really for not a lot of money. That's the worst part, is they're not just whores, but they're cheap whores at that.
Yeah, even if you look at the money that Biden and Joe Biden and Hunter Biden were getting in all those shady deals that were in the Hunter Biden laptop, it's big money for you or I, but it's not big money for the
like $10 million. Like $10 million. I think of that scene in Succession, the HBO show, when the oldest son was saying, $20 million. That's you're not even rich. You got to get to like $50 million to be considered rich in America. So like $10 million that we know of, $10 million to sell out your country as you're like the vice president at the time of the United States, you're the second highest person in government. That's actually not a lot of money. And so you're not even you're not even like, selling your country out for any meaningful money.
Right.
Just shows you how depraved these people are and how dangerous
I bet a lot of
they
them
are.
are blackmailed too because they make all the phones.
They
make all the phones.
It's not just that. There's a lot of sex stuff going on in DC, and these guys,
Epstein, etc. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Epstein was one big honeypot operation.
Yeah,
now, the question is, who was he working for?
There's bigger fish for that guy.
Well, absolutely. And the crazy thing is, he's not the only one doing it. He's just the one that got caught.
Right.
So, I mean, when I worked on the Hill, and this was peanuts, but the first day I was hired as an official, like actual staffer. They read me into the slush fund that Congress had created in the 90s, and I didn't know anything about it. What is this is for?
Brandon, I'm sorry, man. I'm just layman's term guy. Can you tell me what slush fund is?
It's basically it's an account that is a secret account that is used to pay for very bad things. And basically in the 90s, during the whole Clinton thing, the whole Clinton-Lewinsky thing, Congress had created, under Newt Gingrich of all people, had created a slush fund to basically pay off interns and staffers for Congress that would accuse their bosses of sexual misconduct. And it was a way to just basically give them hush money. Now, I wouldn't say all of the Congress people engaged in sexual indiscretion that resulted in, the use of that slush fund. But when I was read into it, it was used a lot, and that's tax dollars that was being used. And now that's
American tax dollars, right?
Yeah, to pay off. And a lot of cases, it sounded to me like the accusations were legit, that they weren't just people trying to get rich, that it was a legitimate. And so when I ran our internship program, I basically, with all my interns that I hired, I sort of like watched out for them. And so I would tell them the offices they were not to go to alone, particularly the women. It was bad. Now, my boss was solid. My boss was a good guy, and and everybody says it about their boss, but my guy really was. He was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. But there was definitely a group that's still there, and you'd hear in the office halls the clickety clack of the girls' heels on the marble floor, and all the congressmen would be leaning out the doorways to see what the girl looked like. And these were married men, and it wasn't always the mistresses, and no judgment here, but sometimes it was the manstresses as well. So they were. There's a lot of Jeffrey Epstein stuff going on that we don't even know about. And that certainly I just is all hearsay from me. And the Chinese are doing, so, if you're a Chinese if you're an intelligence agent operating in the United States, money and sex are two of our biggest weaknesses. It's two of the biggest vices. That's what Washington, D.C. runs on. So for a very low cost of money, you can set up a honeypot operation and ensnare some of the most powerful people in the country, in the world, really. And it's not that hard to do. And so when you talk about blackmail, yeah, I think that's an even more than probably the just being bought off. There's probably a lot of blackmail going on, and it's probably not just China, and it's probably not always just the enemies. You might even have the Brits doing it on us. You might have the Canadians doing it on us, because why not?
Everybody's doing it.
Yeah,
probably like 8 major entities fighting over the data of the phone, and depending on who it is, too. I mean, successfully. But then you have like 14-year-olds just could do it too, probably. But it's weird. And then China makes all the phones, so I think they just get like high-profile people and like blackmail them and like watch their wife and shit. And like these people fuck up a lot, man. They got a lot of demons and shit, man. So it's like,
I was watching. I sometimes I'm interested in stuff like this, and I had major surgery recently, so I was recovering in the hospital. There's not a lot to do, so I was watching. I'm forgetting his name, but he's like the Vatican's leading exorcist, and he said that in the last few years, when he's doing these exorcists, if you believe in that, if he's doing these exorcists and he's talking to these demons, he said the first thing they try to do to deflect attention from they're being pulled out of this body, is they start bringing up American politics and offering all the dirt on American politicians. Sounds like a
liberal. Sounds like a liberal.
Yeah. I always laugh about that. I always think about that because I'm like, well, I'm sure there is, the amount of dirt that these people are involved in, who knows? I mean, it's crazy. And so if you're a Chinese agent, this is a no-brainer. You can, for a very low-hanging fruit, get some of the greatest details about American secrets, through blackmail and through eavesdropping. I mean, you're right. I mean, the technology issue, and it's not secure. I mean, particularly our elected leaders, they don't know how to, so, one of the stories I always tell people when I talk about this is my first book I wrote was called Winning Space, and it was all about the new space race with China and Russia, and how basically the reason I wrote the book was because my first day in government on the Hill, my boss told me to go down to a meeting about space policy. I said, okay, I'll go down and I'll do that and take notes and talk to the people there. And when I got down there, I noticed that and this was my first day. I was like a low level. I was a nobody. So this was like my first day, and I'm looking around, and this is what you do when you work on the Hill. You kind of measure who's in the room to see how important the meeting is. If it's senior staffers and elected leaders, it's an important meeting. It was everybody like me. It was everybody sort of like their first gig. And so it's sort of like, oh, this is not that important. We're all there for the free Chick-fil-A. And the meeting opens, and they're all these retired Air Force and NASA people. This is during 2013, 2014. This is when sequestration is going into effect. Basically, because of all the debt issues and the budget battle with the Obama administration, they couldn't come to a deal. So there were these automatic, very nasty cuts going on across the board at the Defense Department, things that were really going to hurt our nation's defense. It was very unwise what we were doing. And so what this panel was doing is they were saying, as former space experts, let us tell you why, if we don't actually start funding our military to do satellite defense and to do, all the like in space, that if we don't do that to protect those critical systems, very soon countries like China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran are going to be able to, for very cheap, basically make our entire military deaf, dumb, and blind with just a couple of shots. And I'm sitting there, I'm listening, I'm looking around, and nobody cares. And I'm like, I feel like I just caught the aircraft carriers, on their way to Pearl Harbor. Like, who am I going to warn? Nobody's there listening. They're all messing around. So finally, and I talk about this now because he's not in office anymore, Democrat, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name now. Another one I'm forgetting. Democrat from New York walks in, and
Cuomo?
No. This was a rep, and he's I'm forgetting now. I tell a story all the time. I shouldn't forget. But basically, this Democrat from New York walks in, and I'm thinking, great. This is elected leaders here. He looks upset. He's going to take this seriously. And I noticed, though, he's not really paying attention. And he's kind of getting angry in the back of the room. So I walk over to him and I go, Congressman, I go, what's going on? Well, I realize he's angry because he can't get the Keurig machine to work. And he can't figure it out. And I look at him and so I tell him, and he starts lecturing me about how his daughter bought him this, a Keurig. He hates Keurig. Can't make it work. It's too aspirational, he says. He's more of an old-fashioned guy, he says. So I show him how to use the Keurig, takes the coffee, takes the Chick-fil-A, and then he leaves. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the guy and people like him who are charged with protecting us from technology threats. So when you say they can't protect they don't safeguard their phones or anything, it's worse than that. They don't understand, because they're all lawyers and lobbyists. They're not tech guys. China's leadership, 90% of them have backgrounds in engineering and computer science, whereas our people are guys that can't figure out how to use a Keurig machine, and we're supposed to trust that they can protect us on the technology domain. They can't. They're never going to.
Hey, Mr. Brandon, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
A lot of this next thing that I heard about was, I feel like this went under the rug. Did you hear about the Chinese police? They got set up in New York.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a big
What
deal.
what is happening? Like,
Yeah.
so the Chinese actually had
Oh,
a
yeah.
police station that was checking people in Chinatown, correct?
It's not just there. They've got them all over the world. They operate out of their consulates. They call them something else, but they are Chinese police stations,
And
basically.
they shush people, right? They shush people.
Yep. So basically, especially in America and Europe and Canada and these supposedly free countries, basically Chinese move here as dissidents. And I'm seeing in the chat here, 6 states. Yeah, it's like 6 states. And if nobody brought this up in the media, it would have been scaled up to all 50 states, believe me. And so basically the Chinese government in their embassies set up these police stations to hunt down Chinese dissidents. And and in fact, what we're now finding is once the news of these police stations broke and the Chinese had to sort of quietly shut them down, they didn't end their operations hunting down dissidents here. What they did was they started hiring American private investigators to start keeping tabs on the Chinese dissidents and harassing them. So now you've got American PIs who are being hired to do the work of the Chinese government. In many cases, they don't know that's what they're doing. They think they're working to find a missing person, or they think that they're being hired by an angry ex-husband to find out the wife's new lover. And then it turns out, oh no, it's actually they've been hired by the Chinese government to harass and keep tabs on pro-democracy dissidents who fled to America or Canada or Europe. But that's how the Chinese roll. That's how they operate. And they are they have figured out, they've cracked the code on how to basically prevent the Americans from resisting them too much. And they use money, they use sex, they use technology. And we've convinced ourselves for many years, and I say this to the military all the time when I brief them, our view of China is stuck in 50 years ago. Basically, 50 years ago, China was like a giant North Korea. It was, going nowhere fast. So we looked at them and said, we can turn their country into the sweatshop of the world, get cheap goods, get rich, and not have to worry about it, because ultimately they're not innovative. They're imitative at best. They're just going to copy us, so they'll never be able to create.
They still, Brendan, pardon my French, but they still a lot of our.
They absolutely do. They absolutely do. There's no doubt. But is that because they're incapable of creating things on their own, or is it because they want to cut down on the costs and time to catch up with the Americans? Why reinvent the wheel? Yeah, why reinvent the wheel if you can just steal it and then perfect it as you go along? And so, the example that I give, I'll just give you the spiel I give to the Air Force when they come bring me to talk about technology. And I talk about this in my book. I think I mentioned it in Winning Space as well. It's one of my favorite stories. There was a guy in the 1790s. His name was Samuel Slater. And Samuel Slater was a young Scotsman who, from a very early age, worked in the rough and tumble British textile mill. He was a textile factory worker, but he was extremely brilliant, and he knew every aspect. He was like a savant. He knew every aspect of the British textile industry. The British textile industry at that time was the backbone of Britain's economy. It was why they were a global empire that no one could ever touch. They were a lot like the Americans today. Well, Samuel Slater did not want to just be a factory worker. He wanted to run the factories, and he wanted to start his own business and become a great man. But in the British system, if you didn't come from a powerful, well-connected family, if you were a lowly Scotsman, you weren't going to make it far, and he knew that. And so he memorized the inner workings of the factory system there. And there was a new country across the Atlantic called the United States of America, where anybody could get rich or die trying. And so he got on a boat and he went to the United States, landed in Rhode Island, and he built, and at the time, the British viewed us the way we viewed China back in the 70s, as the way we view North Korea today. It's just a big agrarian backwater. It's not going to be anything. Who cares? 13 states, loosely connected, chaos. It doesn't matter. They're too tiny to worry about. So Samuel Slater lands in Rhode Island, and he builds America's first factory. And he's known in America, ultimately, he was the inspiration for Eli Whitney and the cotton gin. He's ultimately known as the father of the American factory system. In England, he's remembered by another name, if he's remembered at all. He's remembered as Slater the Traitor, because that is the first example of industrial espionage. And the Americans, what we did was, we didn't invent the factory. We just stole it from Britain. And we scaled it up in a way that the Brits couldn't do because our country was bigger and we had more growth. Well, today with China, we have 1 million Samuel Slaters, 1 million Slater the Traders. We train our own people, seek to do business. One of my good friends in college, I went to DePaul University in Chicago. I write about it in the book. He learned Mandarin. And the day we graduated from college, he goes, "You're never going to see me again." I said, "Oh, why is that?" He said, "I'm moving to China. I'm going to marry a Chinese girl. I'm going to have Chinese babies. I'm going to be a financial guy in China. China's the future." I said, "All right, well, good luck." And he went over and was a high-tech investor for about 10 years, 12 years in Shanghai. I got a call from him, or I got a direct message from him in 2020. In 2019, fall of 2019. And he's telling me, I'm coming back. Are you still in Chicago? I go, "No, I'm in Florida. I'm never going back to Chicago." Unfortunately, I say this as I love Chicago. And he said, "Well, I'm coming back home." And I go, "Why?" I go, some personal stuff happened. He said, "But there's this new disease here, and I want to get out before they won't let me out." And this was in like October, November of 2019. It was COVID. And how this links back to Slater the Traitor and everything is basically we are sending our best and brightest and our richest people to build up the Chinese infrastructure. And we're doing it because we don't believe they're capable of really threatening us because they're not innovative. But I argue that they are very innovative, just like the Americans were in the previous 2 centuries. It's cheaper for them to rip off the more powerful country and to keep ripping us off to keep up with us. And then eventually, like the Americans did to the British Empire, one day they're just going to leapfrog us when we can't afford our empire anymore. That's what happened with Britain after World War II. They couldn't afford their empire anymore. And we were able to surpass them. And the reason I brought up my friend is because with COVID in the book Biohacked, my newest book, I outline the history of biotech in China and how the Americans and the West gave China this sophisticated biotechnology gene editing capabilities called CRISPR-Cas9. And basically, on the notion that they're going to do all the dangerous, risky R&D, and if it breaks out of the lab, it'll be on them and whatever, without realizing that China planned on taking all of our tech that we gave them, all the research we gave them, all the money we gave them, and yeah, they'll work on cures too because they want cures as well, but they're going to fold that into their bioweapons program. And they're going to plan to use that bioweapons program specifically against the United States. And so we gave them all the capabilities because we told ourselves they'd never be able to catch up with us. They weren't smart enough to really do anything with what we were giving them. But in fact, they were. And if you look at what they're doing in biotech, even today, the Western biotech community reveres China. They want to do business even after COVID. They want desperately to do business in China because it's a growth market, and the Chinese have no moral or ethical restriction on biotechnology research and development. So human cloning projects are underway there. They're doing these horrible things to the Uyghurs, and then they're giving the data to the Europeans that they experiment on these Uyghur prisoners in the concentration camps, and that's what they are. And then the Europeans take it, and the Americans take the data, and our hands are clean because, we didn't do that to the Uyghurs. And we benefit ostensibly from whatever horrible human experimentation was going on. But the bottom line is we tell ourselves the Chinese can't use this stuff against us because they're not smart enough to. They're very smart enough, and they are. And I think COVID's the wake-up call that nobody seems to have figured out, is that was a warning shot. And so that's my issue, is that going back to the 70s, we opened up to China under the auspices that they'll always be the sweatshop of the world. Well, that's not true. They're moving up now into the high tech, and in the notion that they'll never be able to threaten us because they're not smart enough. They're brilliant.
Brandon, they do. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sean. My bad.
Don't they also have? I mean, I don't know where you stand with like the New World Order.
Yeah.
Globalist, one world government
Yeah.
agenda. But don't they kind of have the New World Order on their side a little bit too? I mean, I've been hearing for a long time that the New World Order wants to collapse the United States because we stand in the way of a Chinese style one world government, right? So like, it seems like they want to use the Chinese credit score system and as a blueprint and just spread that worldwide and destroy the United States to be able to implement that here. And
you're 100%. Yeah, that's my read as well. Now, what I'll say though is
that's a good point, Sean.
I disagree with my friends on the right who say that, and I'm in the minority on this. My friends on the right who and you and I agree on this, that there's this new world order and that they're trying to crush America because we're the impediment to this one world socialist.
Can we give a definition? Can we give a definition of new world order? Exactly.
Yeah, basically the nation state system that we've lived in since like at least 1649, where there are countries and there are borders. Basically, the New World Order wants to get rid of all of that and make us a one world system governed by a small group of international elites and have us governed through things like the World Health Organization, World Economic. Yep.
Is the New World Order considered because I want to try to piece this together just as a layman, just as a a person that is not as educated as probably any of you guys. I'm just following what I can follow.
I don't know.
No, these are great questions.
Give yourself a little credit.
My thing is, people say stuff like New World Order and they say Illuminati and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm a musician, man. So Brandon,
I hear
say
you.
all kinds of crazy stuff to me. Okay, but I'm crazy too. It makes sense. But my question is, New World Order. Like, if we had to exactly give the New World Order a legitimate definition.
Yeah.
I think that would help clear up.
So I would just say, and actually I'm seeing there's a chat. Brian here says financial oligarchy. I think that's another good way of looking at it. But basically the world's most powerful, wealthiest people are all in plots. Cahoots together to destroy the nation state. So no more countries. And basically bring us all under the control of this small group of financial elite who will then crush us and get rid of our freedoms and basically make us slaves in this sort of one world system. And they're all socialists. So they're all very hardcore left-wingers, communists.
And that crazy socialists are the most extreme capitalists.
In a way. No, you're right. In a way, the richest people I've ever dealt with were all liberal. They were all Democrats. George Soros is, he's one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he is a flaming liberal. Now, you mentioned Illuminati. I don't get into any of that.
I was joking.
No, I know. Because that is lumped in. I don't know anything about that stuff. What I will tell you though is
I think
there
Sean's
is
an Illuminati actually, if he wants to explain. Like,
Sean is from Illuminati.
Yeah, he's got the gold record.
Sean, what up, dog?
Not me.
But what I will say is that this sort of one world ideology has been with us since at least the early 20th century. And it's generally the socialist, communist left. But where I disagree with my friends on the right who talk about this, most of the time they'll say the one world types, the elite, are controlling China, that China's doing the bidding of the elite. I actually disagree. I think that Stalin used to call these types of people the useful idiots. I think these very powerful Western elites who are controlling World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and the UN, all these international groups, I actually don't think they're the ones driving this at all. They think they're in control, but I actually think they've been bought and compromised and paid for by China. And the reason that China wants to control them is because they know those organizations can be used, as we saw with the COVID lockdowns and the vaccine mandates, those organizations can be used to crush the American people without ever China having to fire a shot. And so my next book that I'm working on, a manuscript I'm working on, is about this, is that I actually think the right is completely wrong when they say it's It's the one world types, the Soros types who are controlling China and getting China to do this for them. I think it's very different. I think it's the Chinese are dominating these organizations. I think they've bought and paid for, either knowingly or unknowingly. These people have been compromised just like Biden has, and they are serving the interests of the Chinese Communist Party. And what is the Chinese Communist Party's goal? Yeah, it's to create a world empire, or a world government, but not a one world government with Americans and Europeans in charge. No, it's a one world government with ethnic Han Communist Chinese running everything.
It's a one world. It's a one world government. It's a one world government where one country rules everybody.
That's right. So the globalists think that they're getting rid of nation states, but they don't realize. I think they've been hijacked by the oldest nation state of them all, China, and that they are this globalist mentality, which is completely unworkable. It's completely impractical. No human being is ever ultimately going to be able to make that work. The globalists are being hijacked by a national movement in the Chinese Communist Party to do the work that the Chinese military cannot do right now, which is to conquer America. And you just look at, it isn't just with the COVID vaccines, it goes back to global warming. Look at all of these global taxes that are being, when I was in college, they were talking about, creating like a world trade organization that would only do the environment. So like a world environmental organization. So what World Trade Organization does for breaking down trade barriers among nations to make free trade more workable, they wanted to then take that model and apply it to making universal climate policies that nations had to accept even if they didn't want to. A World Environmental Organization. Now, it hasn't happened yet, but I know many academics, and I have many friends most of my friends are liberals. So most of my friends are far left people, and this is the stuff they want to do, and they have the resources, and they have the mentality, and they have the connections to try to do it. So I think all those organizations and those proposed organizations, they're not actually operating on their own. They've been hijacked, and they don't even in many cases realize that they are the useful idiots that Stalin talked about to crush us without the Chinese having to fight us.
What is a peaceful
chess game?
Chess game, and like to get out of all this like mass surveillance, attempted slavery. I mean, they have a lot of charges on us already. I would assume. Violating Fourth Amendment, I guess, and like with spying. Millions. Literally millions of crimes. Not millions.
A lot of Fourth Amendment rights don't even exist anymore. When I worked in government, there was the Dark Star facility that we were funding, and it's a big server farm in Utah that was built in 2012. It was Obama's big contribution to the psychodrama, and basically Dark Star, I think it might be the world's largest server farm. It's one of the world's largest server farms, and basically national security. And by the way, I'm a big fan in theory of the NSA. I think it's been misused and abused. I do think we need these institutions to actually protect us from real enemies like China, but unfortunately it's been used for the wrong things lately. But the NSA was basically going back to 2000, 2001. Well, actually going back to Project Echelon, but basically after 9/11, they were soaking up so much data, so many personal communications between Americans. They couldn't go through it all in a timely manner. So they basically have been saving everything and sending, and now they're supposed to delete it, but they don't. They've been sending it over to this new server farm where they're developing artificial intelligence algorithms to kind of sift through all of our private conversations to figure out who's a threat and who's not. Yeah. Now I still think that we should use these weapons against actual like terrorists, like Al-Qaeda. I think that we do need to have these systems. The problem is we have scaled it up so much and we are so sloppy about it. When I was in government, there was an issue where, which of course this is going to happen. NSA analysts who had access to the electronic surveillance program were using those tools to spy on their girlfriends. We're using those tools to spy on women that they wanted to have relationships with to see what was going on. They were using it to spy on significant others to see if they were having affairs. It was a big scandal that was brushed under the rug in like 2013. This was another Obama era scandal. Another scandal was with that server farm. if I'm trying to remember, if I think it was with the server, it was with Dark Star, I think. Basically, they started going through this information, and they were not just using it to figure out what Americans are talking with Al Qaeda or ISIS or whatever. They started partnering with the Drug Enforcement Agency to go after drug dealers. Now, I don't like drug dealers any more than anyone else does, but using foreign intelligence collection methods on drug dealers is absurd. And in the case of the drug dealers, they are actual American citizens, so they should be protected by the Fourth Amendment, but they were having their Fourth Amendment rights violated with wanton abandon. And
I think
so,
they documented it too. I think with these server farms, it's basically just evidence of them violating the Fourth Amendment.
Right. And so if I'm not mistaken, right. And so if I'm not mistaken, that program ended in failure because I think the defense attorneys ended up basically saying you got the wiretaps basically on my clients, that it was a violation of constitutional law, and they had to drop the case, and it was a big scandal. But the bottom line is that we have abused a lot of the stuff that our government was given permission to do in the name of national defense, which in some cases makes us which in some cases makes us a lot like the Chinese. Another thing that, and I don't mean to go on a rant here, I know this was kind of loosely connected to what I was supposed to be talking about, but another thing that really, really pisses me off is the use of these intelligence capabilities to go after a president that they didn't like, Trump. Now, I had problems with Trump too, but to go after him and to basically say he's a Russian spy, which, by the way, he would be the worst Russian spy in the world because he'd be telling everybody he knows Putin personally. He would have been bragging about it. So like this whole notion that it was just absurd, but they use that for political ends. And so that's the real danger here, is that you now could have the politicization of this capability and the weaponization of it to go after your domestic political enemies, which is horrible. And we're seeing it happen.
It's un-American. America's over at that point.
Yeah, and I'd be saying this if it were Republicans doing it to Democrats, because it's just ridiculous.
It's a line crossed, right? That is the elimination of our country, basically.
Right. So I didn't mean to cut you off. I know you were asking me a question about, and I heard the Fourth Amendment, and I sort of Anthony, and I started going on my riff. But I think you were asking me a question, Anthony. I'm sorry,
more or less like an exit strategy on all this, because I think it has to be broken down a lot of times to explain what's happening too. But I think like what do you think is a good exit strategy out of all this? Basic. I mean, I feel like there's like several organizations like trying to take our rights away, type of vibe, like competing for it almost. And like, how do we get out of this peacefully without like lifting a sword on or anything?
Peacefully is I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, the good news is, it sounds to me, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but it sounds to me like, at least on the Republican side, there's been a real awakening. And not just among voters, but actually among elected leaders, like that this can't go on.
Only because of the awakening among the population, though.
Right, right.
The driving force, right?
Yeah, but it's just ironic that it's the Republican Party that seems to be, and there are elements on the left, but it's ironic that it's the Republicans that are the loudest voices saying we've got to at least regulate this and rein it in. So I think a peaceful strategy is and I know this sounds very trite and whatever, but I mean, I worked on the Hill. Still the number one way to get through to your elected leaders, if you don't have money, which the most of the population is not bribing, it's to call your congressman and basically micturate in their ear until they listen to you. And I saw that repeatedly, where if you had a calling campaign with ordinary citizens, basically calling the congressman every name in the book saying, we're not going to vote for you again, that will drive them to action that they ordinarily might not take. And even if it means putting them against the interests of their big donors, because at the end of the day, the one thing that trumps big financial donations is you still got to get votes. And so I still believe, and maybe I'm naive, but I still believe, given how, especially the Republicans, which are the least likely group, I would think, to become civil libertarians, given how the Republicans have become so pro civil liberty, I believe that with the two leading candidates on the right now in 2024, Trump and DeSantis, I think there's a real chance the party could lead to some changes in regulation peacefully to the way these programs are working. Trump did start going after it when he was in office. And so, I think that if we can get another Republican, and I know that they hate each other right now, but in my opinion,
that's theater.
Yeah, my opinion, Trump and DeSantis are aligned on a lot of key issues, and they're competing for the crown, so they're going to tear each other's guts out in public. But DeSantis was very much a Trump protege until like the last 8 months, and so and there wasn't any real policy break. It was just over personality and sort of the desire to be the kingpin. So I think that once we get through this election, if we can get either one of those two men in the White House, I think that we might be able to start pushing back peacefully through legislation on some of these violations. Otherwise, America's over, because I think if we get another 4 years of Biden, it's really, China Biden. If we get another 4 years of Biden, it's over. I mean,
Brandon, what do you think? What do Anthony, Sean, and Brandon, what do you guys think about this? Let me ask all three of you guys, all three of you men, a question. Now, I look at it like this. I'm a registered independent. Now, I don't particularly like where the left's going right now. I feel like it's just going so far. I can't even really stand with that right now. So I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm kind of right of center with current politics.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's not even really like that insane to think. It's like, it's, you look at what's going on. Anthony, Sean, Brandon, what do you guys think? Like, how do we turn some of this stuff around as far as from a social standpoint? I know this is getting off topic of China. Anthony, I'm sorry if you don't want me to ask this question. We can go to something else. I don't want to be a, I'm trying to. How do we turn some of this stuff around? That's what's going on right now.
Well, it's going to take a while. I mean, I don't mean to. It's going to take a while. That's why Breitbart used to say, if I'm probably going to butcher the quote, but I believe it was, politics is downstream from culture. So, and you guys are musicians, so you're in the culture. I mean, you're much more so than I am. So I think it's wild when I see like entertainers who are suddenly not necessarily Republican, but they certainly are leaning more toward sort of the Trump populist side of the right. And I think that's huge. I mean, Joe Rogan, I know he's not a conservative, but he's definitely seems to be more sort of socially aligned with a lot of that movement. I think Brandon, I think it's called common sense, man. I do too. I agree. I always tell people that, when we talk politics, I always say, like, I'm for the common sense candidate. And for me, that's usually the Republicans. But, I saw somebody in the chat mention RFK Jr., which is hilarious because like 10 years ago, I would have been like, he's the worst. But now I hear him and I'm like, you know what?
Right.
Like,
and
he's articulate. He's articulate. He's in better shape than me, and he's a lot older than me. He's articulate. He's kind of cool. And I like him. I don't agree with him on everything, but I know he's not bought and paid for, even though he's rich. And that's what I liked about Trump too, is that Trump kind of didn't need money, so he was able to be his own man. And so I think, but I think there's a cultural sea change going on, and I think it's going to unite people. Really strange bedfellows. Like I said, I would have never praised RFK 10 years ago on anything. And I find myself, I find myself really appreciative of him. And I think that's because the culture is shifting.
Yeah, dude. I mean, the left has gone so fucking insane.
Yeah,
they've left a lot of people behind. I mean, when you compare the political left of today to JFK or something, it's just so.
Even in 2000,
JFK would be a Republican.
Right. It's not the same world. It's not the same world at all. They've 180'd on every single issue, and it's like, how can you do that, dude? It's not even.
I mean, Bernie Sanders still is to the right of most I would even say most Republicans on immigration. Bernie Sanders for 30, 40 years was anti-illegal immigration. He sounded Trumpier than Trump back in 15 years ago. I don't know what his stance is now, but I mean, and Bernie is considered like really far left, but on certain issues, Bernie would be to the right of some Republicans today. The parties it's become such a mess with the way that things have, and that's all because of money. That's all because of special interests, right? That the special interests want open borders. The special interests, they want certain things because that benefits their bottom line, and they don't care about red or blue. They care about green. They want money. That's all they care about,
Yep.
I saw somebody comment about 10 minutes ago about the Chinese space program. I'm happy to comment for that person if you want on the intention of, so because this was what my whole first book was about. And they used to make fun of me on the Hill. They used to call me the space guy or the space cadet. I was the only guy talking about this stuff at the time. Of course, now everybody talks about it, but I was the first guy to write a best-selling book on this issue. China's space program, unlike ours, doesn't care about gender. They don't care about, the pride flag one way or the other. All they care about is getting to the moon.
No distractions, huh?
Right. They don't care about any of that. They care about getting to, and this is the Chinese Communist Party.
Hey, 1 second, man. No, it's hilarious. So like if they don't have any distractions, they can do what we did in the 60s.
Right. I know. Right, exactly. You're right.
Absolutely.
But the difference is they don't want to just go to the moon and plant a flag there. They want to go to the moon with the Russians.
We just need to stop buying stuff from China and move our factories back and just defund them. Basically,
I completely
and then they
agree.
can play action figures and T-sets with themselves with no fucking money. I think it's the safest way out is defund them. I mean,
I agree.
I don't want to fight you. I don't want to fucking beat up a bunch of 19-year-olds. I don't want to fucking make an entire generation sunless. I mean, I just be chill out. We'll fucking chill out, and then just be shut the fuck up and chill out,
I agree.
We just build our stuff back up, American made only,
Well,
shut the fuck up and chill out. I like
that. That's Or,
I like that. I like. Hey, Anthony Robbins, 2024, man.
What was it? Eddie Murphy said in the '80s. Eddie Murphy told Bill Cosby to have a Coke and a smile and shut the f up. And so that's sort of the idea. And you're right, because I still think their primary threat that they pose to us is not yet military. They're not yet there. The Chinese. They are still. It's still right. It's still geoeconomic.
I don't want to bring that up. I don't want our 19-year-olds to fucking kill them all. I want to chill it out. It's I want to fucking
and
maybe we start making Nikes again. I've been practicing.
Well, and think about it. There's
China has the Uyghurs. And they make Nikes for LeBron James.
That's
and make
right.
money
It's
off
disgusting.
Of.
Right. And
we should stop participating in slave labor. We're buying slave labor. Like every one of us.
I agree. 100%.
We can make our own stuff.
If you look at there's a graph, I posted it a while ago. I have to find it again. I posted it on my Twitter. There is a direct line or direct connection between the left always talks about income inequality, and there's a lot of it in America today. It didn't always exist this way. In fact, the time period where there was the least amount of income inequality was when we had our factories operating at peak efficiency in the American Midwest, and the ordinary man could go out and get a job that was well-paying and secure with great benefits and raise a family on it without having to have all these side hustles and all this other stuff going on. That was in the 1950s to the 1970s. And then what happened in the 1970s was we opened up to China, and then Wall Street, Jimmy Carter actually is the one who did this. He told them to go ahead and do it. Wall Street took all of our factories, took them out of Ohio, took them out of Illinois, took them out of the Midwest, and gave them to places like Guangzhou, China, and gave them to, and China in 30 years built the world's biggest middle class through that manufacturing capability that we gave them. So if you want to worry about, and then if you look at income inequality scale, it really exploded from 1980. Right.
We sold our middle class.
Yes. Yeah. And so all we need to do is bring our factories home, at least partly even. And you're going to see income inequality narrow, and you'll see families being able to survive again. Yeah, exactly. And
it'll adjust over like a 10-year period of time.
It'll take 10 to 15 years, but you got to start. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we got to start yesterday. I mean, honestly.
Exactly. And there's a great book. A friend of mine, he's dead now, but Curtis Ellis, he was an advisor to the Trump campaign in 2016. He wrote a book called Pandemonium. And it's a phenomenal book. It's an easy read too. I love easy reads. And he spent his whole life. He was a very old man when he died, but he spent his whole life working on this issue. And his whole thing was, you just got to take the Band-Aid off. Just rip it off. It's going to hurt, but if we don't do it, we're going to be slaves to China. And and I see Brian commented again, and he's right. He's talking about the Lagrange points on between the Earth and the Moon. So basically, we can loop all this together because China, in taking the Moon, what they want to do, think of the Earth and the Moon as one system, one cohesive unit. If you control the orbits around the Earth, and then you control the higher orbit of the Lagrange points, and then you control the Moon itself, you've taken the high ground. And that's what the Chinese talk about. They call it space dominance. And in my book, I talked about got to have space dominance. I'm not allowed to use that around Space Force anymore. They've banned that term. It's not allowed. It's verboten because it's too heteronormative, I was told, whatever that means. But basically, the Chinese want to take that. They want to hold it.
Brandon, you're a comedian too, man. That was funny.
Thank you.
Heteronormative.
That's what they said.
That's what here, man.
But that's what a colonel pulled me aside in 2021 when I was talking to Space Force, and I was using the term space dominance, and everybody was getting very uncomfortable. And afterward, this female colonel came up to me and she pulled me aside and she said, "You know why everybody was very uncomfortable?" And I said, "No, I have no idea." She said, "It's because you used the term space dominance, and that's we're not using that anymore." And I go, "Why?" She said, "Well, it's considered to be offensive, and it's too heteronormative.
It's male toxic."
Exactly. And that's a leading colonel in the United States Space Force.
Yeah, I could never listen to anybody like that. That's why I'm like self-employed. So I couldn't listen. I couldn't imagine.
Well, I'm a consultant. I'm a consultant, so they can't fire me. They just don't use me anymore. That's
hard. Yeah, if someone's just like, you can't say this, I just be like, shut the fuck up, you fucking.
Yeah, no, and it happens all the time.
I just like next person in conversation. Like, I'm just like, get the fuck away. So like fly slaughtering them.
That's right. And so the Chinese, they don't just think about it like this. They build their systems to implement this plan of dominating what they call the Earth-Moon system. And it goes beyond that. It goes to natural resources. The world's first trillionaire with a T is believed it will come in the next 30 years. We will have a trillionaire, and that person will come from the space mining sector.
Mining asteroids.
Mining asteroids.
The Rothschilds are already trillionaires.
Well, the whole thing is China wants to dominate that industry. And so when we talk about
the Teutoni, you know, so I'm saying, you know what I mean? It's like, they want to be the first people to say hello on the moon or something. It's like, fuck off, dude. You know what I mean? That's how I feel. It's like, stop, chill out. It's like, that's like how I feel. It's like, just chill the fuck out, man.
Yeah.
You know I mean?
So, but they're building the capabilities to do that. And so, and we see, and you just look at what they did on Earth with what we were talking about with manufacturing, right? They're going to do that with space manufacturing. They're going to, except they're going to get there
cut off
first.
manufacturing and starve everybody. I mean, they have
that's the key
situation and heads up that we don't have, and we need to start developing this shit, or we're going to fucking be obsolete.
And this is what I've been trying to do.
Obsolete, you know?
This is what I've been trying to do for years.
I agree, Anthony. I agree.
Yeah, you're right. And this is what I've been trying to do for years now. They listened to me more during the Trump years. After he was, kicked out of office, after he left office, they still bring me up, but I always feel like I'm their performing monkey. Like they just bring me up to sort of like kind of laugh and like, oh, okay, this person is, he's a throwback. But I still go up there occasionally and I give them my spiel. Speaking of censorship, though, with my other book, Biohacked, January of 2020, I was asked to go to a base in Florida, or I live in Florida, and so it was easy for me to do. I drove up there and I went to on base, and part of my talk involves not just space technology, but all technology. So a part of my talk for the military is biotechnology. And it was a very elite group I was talking to. And when I finished giving my spiel, and I worked in, because I like to work in current events because that makes my talks more interesting and whatever. And so at the time, COVID is just reaching the United States. We don't really know what it is. But I, through my friend that was living in China, and I had friends at the State Department who were saying, hey, we're getting reports from our embassies in China. There's a disease, blah, blah, blah. So I brought up COVID in my biotech section of the talk. And I said, there's a chance that this was a manufactured illness. And I start getting into the science. Now, for the record, I'm married to a geneticist. She went to Yale. She worked for Dr. Collins at NIH. So I do have some connection to what was going on. I was telling the military, because they asked me what's going on, what is my take, and I gave it to them. And I said, look, there's some early scientific papers coming out in France indicating that the genetic makeup of COVID is not natural. There's something known as a furin cleavage site, which is indicative always when we look at a disease that has a furin cleavage site, it means it was engineered in a lab. And I said, look, there's presence DNA, not just of COVID, but of Ebola and malaria and I think smallpox as well, HIV, cancer, which means this thing's a chimera. It's a chimeric illness, which usually is indicative of a manufactured illness. And so I gave this spiel, and the whole audience was interested. I'm in, by the way, Ma, I'm in my mid 30s. They were all interested. And so I thought, great, I got paid. I was happy. I'm going home, and I get a phone call from the gentleman who's a friend of mine. He organizes these talks. He goes, what the hell did you say to them? I go, what do you mean? He goes, I got a letter. He goes, I got a nasty gram from the colonel who's, you've been banned. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, you are, as long as that colonel is there, never allowed to set foot on that base again. He goes, what the hell did you say? So I started, he basically wanted me to, as I'm driving, recount everything that I said. And so I give him the whole talk. And I said, well, what did the colonel, what's the official complaint that they have against me? He said, well, he said, according to him, you made a homophobic slur. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I never even, and he said, well, it must have been because you mentioned HIV. I said, that's not why. He goes, what do you think it was? I said, I'll tell you what it was. I'm talking about things that I'm not supposed to be talking about. And I'm not supposed to know about it because I'm just an outside consultant. I'm Schmucky the Clown. I'm not in the know, and I'm not supposed to say this stuff without getting permission. And I blabbed about my theory that it came from a lab. And
the first thing that they do is call you a bigot.
Yeah, it's the first thing they do. And so, I was never allowed to go back on that base for the last, and finally I went back last August because that colonel was transferred out. And those guys love me, by the way. The rank and file guys in special forces love me, but it's the leadership that's the problem often. So finally they brought me back, but for another issue. But, about 8 months after that event, I was asked to go out to California to a military facility. I was part of a group of speakers, and we spoke. And Biotech came up again. And me being me, I'm like the little kid who keeps putting my hand on the flame. I figured, well, let's see if I can go 2 for 0 here. Let's see if I can get banned at another base, because now it's just kind of a game to me. Now my wife hates when I talk like this, but now it's just sort of I like to piss people off. So I start telling them my take about how COVID was from a lab. And nobody this time had any shocked look. In fact, everybody in the room was nodding knowingly. And now these guys are like, this group that I was talking to, these guys are like, they're doing like black budget stuff. They're doing like the highest of the high end clearance level stuff. And so they're nodding knowingly. And so I'm sort of like, okay, I'm going to go. In fact, there was a guy from Kevin McCarthy's office there too, but that's another story. And so then I'm like, I'm going to go further. So then I start really getting into detail, and I start really breaking down my theory and why I think this was a bioweapon, and that it wasn't actually accidentally leaked. I think it was purposefully leaked, and the target was none other than Donald Trump. So now these guys are really nodding along. And so after I give my spiel, 2 colonels are in the back, And normally when I give a talk, there's like a 10-minute break and they sort of all gather around me and they want to talk to me and whatever. So these two colonels are waiting for me in the back of the room, and I'm packing up and I'm leaving, and they follow me out, and they're two Marine Corps colonels. And they're throwing terms like biological 9/11 around. And they're telling me that their team has been for, at that point, about 8 months, quote, convinced that this was a biological 9/11 and that I'm over the target. And then I told them about my experience at the other base, and they were laughing, and they were like, yeah, you probably that was their way of canceling you. And then another guy came up to me from the Air Force, Air Force Intel guy, and he joins the conversation. And his unit was charged with specifically investigating COVID origins. And he was nodding along, saying, he said the same thing as, you're right over target. He goes, there's nobody in the intel community that genuinely believes this was a natural phenomenon, that this thing was a geopolitical event, as he called it. And I said, what are you going to do about it? He said, well, we're not allowed to talk about it in the public. It's banned. The Biden administration doesn't want to know about it. Basically, they don't want to deal with it.
The Biden administration doesn't want to know about it.
Right. And so basically that's when I sat down. I told my wife, I said, look, I'm basically losing contracts left and right. I can't, this is affecting my livelihood. So I might as well just double down, and I might as well just write the book. And I churned out my book in 5 weeks. It took me to write the book in 5 weeks. I called on resources that I had deep in government and NIH, NIAID, Fauci's team. And I basically discovered, and I learned so much. I'm not a scientist by background, so this is all new to me. I learned how basically everything China did to us in manufacturing, when they took our manufacturing and they replicated it, scaled it up, and built their middle class and became a world power in 50 years. They're doing that in every industry. They're doing it in space. They're doing it in biotech. They're doing it across the board because the Chinese want to be the dominant superpower by the year 2049, which is the 100th year anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party, when they beat Chiang Kai-shek in the Civil War, and when it became a communist nation. And Xi Jinping, their leader, has a vision. It's called China Dream, where China will dominate all of the industries of what's known as the fourth industrial revolution: biotech, quantum computing, quantum internet, 5G and 6G internet, hypersonic technology, space technology, biocomputing, all the new industries that will make the future. He wants China to dominate, and he has worked tirelessly to basically get as much capabilities and knowledge from the West, to put it in China, and then to beat the West, and to basically what America was during the Industrial Revolution, what we were during the Digital Revolution, where we dominated those things, he wants China to be. And he's going to do that, and he's doing that right now. And I believe COVID was a warning shot of what they're going to do. In China, they talk about the military there, and I talk about this in the book. They talk about using that gene editing system, CRISPR-Cas9, which is supposed to be used to genetically edit out disease from people suffering. They're talking about using that for conducting what they call specific ethnic genetic attacks, taking all of our DNA data. There's a company called Beijing Genomics Institute, and they basically, they're the largest genomics company in China. They're state funded. They're run by members of the Communist Party, and they partner a lot with American companies. And they have the world's largest genetic database. It's called the Gene Bank. And they basically take everybody in the world's genetic information, knowingly or unknowingly, we give it to them. They put it in that gene bank, and they use artificial intelligence now to collate that information to identify individuals and groups of people they don't like. And they're tailoring, using this gene editing system, they're weaponizing viruses that will be deployed that are specifically encoded for the genetics of that individual or that group, to kill them or to torment them or to blackmail them, whatever, with genetically engineered disease to, affect political outcomes. And I think COVID was a warning shot. I think it was their proof of concept, and I think they're getting ready to do much worse.
Didn't they just buy like Ancestry.com or
Yeah.
23?
Yeah.
So they're buying up all of the
Yeah. Yeah.
DNA
Think of
code.
what social media companies did 10 years ago with all of our data, right? How we thought we were getting Facebook, and at one time, if you can believe it, MySpace was a thing. And we thought, Twitter, we were just going to get a great way to interact and it'll be cool. And we'll have our face so everybody can identify us. Well, people don't realize that Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, one of his initial investors was a front company for the CIA because they wanted the facial recognition capabilities.
Right.
So we're handing over all of our personal data freely without getting paid for it, which those companies then take and they sell either to companies that want to do media advertising or to governments around the world. Well, now that model is being used in genomics. It's being used in biotechnology. And they're doing it to everybody, and they're doing it to babies. The nifty tests in Europe, now it's been banned here, but BGI owns these genetic tests that we use to figure out if babies have any genetic illnesses in the womb. Europe and Canada uses the BGI genetic tests, and in 2019, Reuters did an expose because BGI promised the Europeans and the Canadians, we're going to collect that data and test it, and then we'll destroy the data when the testing is over. Well, it turns out that no, they were saving that data in that gene bank because they want that data in order to be able to create weapons for Europe that will kill European populations and Canadian populations. By the way, it is illegal under Chinese law, under penalty of death, for Chinese genomics firms to share the DNA information of Chinese citizens with foreign companies. So that should tell you what they're thinking and
where they're coming from.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
They probably wouldn't allow Americans or any other populations to come in and buy up their land, their farmland, and their companies either.
No. When Americans, during the big manufacturing theft, when American firms would willingly uproot and go to China, there was a famous example of a mid-sized South Carolina-based textile firm. They uprooted. They had been there for 150 years or something in South Carolina, and they basically devastated the town when they left. They went to middle of China, and they were forced to partner with a Chinese firm and give them give these Chinese firms all of the manufacturing knowledge and intellectual property. And basically, when the American executives showed up to open the factory, they found that the Chinese government had sent armed guards to prevent them from going into the factory. They changed the locks, and then all the Chinese workers were in there reporting to Chinese managers, and that company had been nationalized by the Chinese government. So basically and that's the kind of stuff they're doing now in high tech, and they're doing it all the time. And we're stupid because we keep going over there because we want to make money. The head of Lockheed Martin, one of our largest defense industry guys, said, our defense contractors, he said last week to the Wall Street Journal, I don't know why the U.S. government is intent on poking China. If we go to war with them, all of our equipment is built in China. They can just cut us off from our war making. So like what? The Chinese we're going to war with, we're going to ask them, please let us still have access to our...
They have all the factories. They're the world's factories.
It's ridiculous.
We wouldn't have anything. Like the entire region of the North won the Civil War. They have the population and the factories. It's like...
medications, everything. I mean...
They have everything, yeah.
It's such a bad move to allow yourself to be that vulnerable to a country that you consider an enemy. You can't really get there without the people making the decisions at the top being actually in the pockets of the Chinese.
Right. That's exactly right. Because they bought and paid for. Because it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, it doesn't just happen like that,
Right.
What is it? White girl wasted, huh? What does that actually mean?
I don't know. Be careful. It's a little racist. Ukrainian biolabs. So just to be fair, my book really fixates on China, but I've talked about the Ukrainian biolabs. It's a little bit convoluted because we were funding those biolabs. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency, going back to the 90s, was funding those biolabs, but that was partly, and I can't speak for all of the biolabs. But the biolabs I was always familiar with had to do with the disarmament of the old Soviet bioweapons and chemical weapons that had been left in Ukraine. If you remember, when the Soviet Union collapsed, that was not a planned event in the life of the Soviet Union. And so basically they kind of just, because they couldn't afford to maintain their empire anymore, they basically just kind of pulled out of Ukraine and left everything as it was, including 300 nuclear weapons, a bunch of biological and chemical weapons capabilities that were just basically left out. And so the Nunn-Lugar agreement, basically we sent our Defense Threat Reduction Agency guys to create these biolabs to disarm the loose bioweapons and chemical weapons. So some of that Putin's talking about, I think, is propaganda he's using, because some of that was actually, we did that openly to prevent bioweapons and chemical weapons from falling into the hands of terrorists. Now, there are other biolabs there, I think, that NIH was funding that probably were not good. I don't know what they were there for, but I would say we should not be doing that. But you have to remember, the reason that the NIH and the NIAID and many of these American biotech firms, the reason that they fund research like gain-of-function research on coronaviruses in these foreign countries is because these foreign countries have lower standards and ethical standards. So a guy like Fauci's not interested in creating a bioweapon. Fauci's interested in getting cures that he can make money off of faster and getting the Nobel Prize for doing it. So if the U.S. government wants,
he serves Satan as well, I think, too.
Yeah, I think you're right. No, I think a lot of these guys do, whether they realize it or not. And so the Fauci, his whole thing with Fauci is that the Obama administration cut off gain-of-function research that he was funding at the University of North Carolina, because the Obama administration said, if this coronavirus gets out, it's going to kill a lot of people and we're going to get blamed. That's going to hurt us. So Fauci saluted and said, yes, Mr. President, I'll discontinue immediately. What he really did, though, was he took all of that research and that money and that information, and he gave it to a group called EcoHealth Alliance, which was a third party. It was a nonprofit group that did a lot of work overseas on zoonotic research. Hands it to them. They give it to the bat lady at Wuhan, Dr. Shi Zhengli, Wuhan Institute of Virology, where they do all these gain-of-function research on coronavirus, and then it conveniently comes out. The reason Fauci did that, he's not interested in building bioweapons. He did it because he's trying to get to what he thinks are cures faster, so he can make money, so he can get prestige, so he can elevate himself. Now, the mRNA cures that we created for COVID, the Moderna and the Pfizer type cures, not the Johnson & Johnson, because that was more of a traditional cure. That didn't work either, though. But the mRNA cures are next generation tech, supposedly. Fauci didn't care actually about getting cures for coronavirus. What he wanted to do was use the methods that the Wuhan Institute of Virology creates to possibly cure coronavirus. He wanted to use that to create an mRNA cure for HIV/AIDS, which is his big obsession since the 80s. And so for him, he's cutting corners because he wants to get the research faster. So he'll partner with a country like China, knowing they have no safety standards, no ethical standards. That's why he wants to partner with them, because they'll get there faster than we can. And then he gets the end product. Okay, so it's like how we build TVs in China. You know, they assemble it for us, or iPhones. They assemble it for us. We get the finished product. Apple makes a lot of money. Same thing. They assemble the risky cure, the risky vaccine, whatever. They send it to us. Fauci gets the credit. Fauci gets the money. Probably the same thing in Ukraine. The same thing going on in the Sudan.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense as far as Fauci, his motivations and all that. But then you got to enter in all that other part of this world that we were talking about earlier, like the Epstein world and the blackmail world.
Yeah.
And how is he blackmailed? Who calls him and tells him where he needs to stand on this and that and steer this thing, you know?
Honestly, for him, my read on him is you don't have to blackmail him to get him to do the bad thing. It's because it's all about money with him and all about prestige. And in Biohacked, I go through the royalties his lab was making. People don't realize. So like, you know, government scientists, they get paid well, but they're not getting paid what private sector scientists are getting paid. I mean, the private sector guys at Johnson & Johnson and Moderna and all these companies, they're getting paid the big bucks. Fauci, he was the highest paid person in government, but that's because he'd been there for 50 years. And if you're in government for enough time, you're making okay money. But even for Fauci, even for government, I mean, he's making okay money. I mean, compared to the private sector, he's making maybe, I think, $350 a year, $250 a year. Maybe it was $450 at the end, but that's a lot of money to someone like me. But to a doctor, that's not a lot of money if you're doing the kind of research he was doing. Well, where he was making all the money that really wasn't understood was in the government. In order to attract talent to government labs, because they don't pay as much up front, you get to get royalties on any. If you're the leader of the lab, of the government lab, if you're in charge of it, like Fauci was, you get royalties. You get a major cut of whatever vaccines or cures are created from that lab's research. So the government's funding it, but you as a scientist, because it's your lab that you're running for the government, not only are you getting your government paycheck, but then you're going to get percentages of, and you get to keep that. And so that's how Fauci, because Fauci was, his lab, he was overseeing a lab for 50 years, came up with all kinds of stuff. So he's making all of his money on royalties. And then he's got a nice base salary as well. So for Fauci, the motivation is simple. It's money. And then he wants to get the Nobel Prize as well. So it's money and prestige. So whether they had a blackmail on him or not, I don't know. But he doesn't even need to be blackmailed because he's so greedy. It's just about the money. He doesn't care how he gets it. He just wants the money.
Yeah, I tend to think, though, that whoever coordinated the coronavirus era, you know, that thing was well planned, well executed, and I think it was important to him, you know. So I can imagine somebody was calling in every single blackmailed person they've got, you know, moving pieces around.
Well, you're right. And it goes back to why, because, you know, Tom Cotton and guys like that, Rand Paul, they are of the mind this came from a lab, but they're of the mind, which is the more popular opinion on in that theory, which is that it was an accidental leak. I'm alone so far that I know of in the public saying that this was a biological 9/11. Because at the time, what was going on, you have to contextualize it. In chapter 9 of the book, it's called Biological 9/11. And I walk the reader through why I think it might have been an attack. First of all, in 2015, a group of Chinese military scientists write a white paper in which they specifically outline how the Chinese military can weaponize coronaviruses and deploy it against the United States to collapse our medical and economic system to have greater strategic effects, to collapse the political order. Now, what's going on? Donald Trump's president. Donald Trump's the first American president in 50 years to use trade against the Chinese. Normally, they're the ones using it on us. And he does it going after first food, going after agriculture, American-produced agriculture bound for China, raising tariffs on them, raising the price of those goods going into China, making food more unaffordable. Well, historically in China, 4,000 years of history, almost every single dynasty collapses. The first phase of collapse is famine. So Xi Jinping, who's been using trade war on us for years, he doesn't view Trump's trade war as a businessman trying to get a better deal for his people, which is what I think Trump was doing. He views it as the opening shot of a war through other means. And what happened, despite what the Wall Street Journal says, China got its ass handed to it in the trade war. I cite multiple very well-connected Chinese Communist Party economists who openly admitted after the trade deal was signed with Trump, the new trade deal, that Trump basically did more damage to China's economy and weakened their GDP growth far more than the trade war did to the United States. So all the talk about how the trade war was a failure, Trump dropped the ball, it hurt farmers. It did hurt American farmers because trade wars are never one-sided. But we hurt China more in that war. And the takeaway from that for Xi was, I got to stop this guy because he's going to perfect this tool and he's going to use it again on me. And of course, at the time, Trump was ramping up the tech war on China. So what did Xi do? He signs this trade deal on agriculture in, I think, December of 2019. And a month or two later, what hits us? COVID-19. And it's a perfect weapon because it's not going to kill us all because China doesn't want to kill us all. They want to use us as a market. They just want to they want to destabilize us, they want to weaken us, and they want us to get rid of Trump. And it's in the middle of an election year. Trump's a very controversial guy. At least half the country hates him. The only reason he's going to win re-election is because everything's going well under him, despite all the media stuff. So you collapse the American economy with a lockdown and coronavirus, and you've just removed the one key thing that's going to get Trump reelected. Because everybody doesn't like Trump anyway. He's controversial. So if the economy's not doing well under him, most people are not going to vote for him. And so that's what happened. Is and Fauci, when you talk about blackmail, maybe it is something because Fauci's the leading proponent of the lockdowns that are going to kill the economy. He's like a evangelical on lockdowns and vaccine mandates. And I think it was a bioweapon. I think it was a bioweapon that was engineered and deployed directly at America during our election, knowing that if it worked out well, that we were going to remove the one impediment to China's plan, which is Donald Trump. And he's gone now. And they have Joe Biden, who's a literal Chinese agent in the White House. It's perfect executed plan.
Yeah, it makes sense. Although when you say vote, I'm like, vote.
Yeah.
It's
I honestly, though, I do think that I think Trump probably did lose because people were so programmed to hate him by the media. And the only reason people, I think a lot of the normies were going along with him was because the economy was doing so well. But once the economy crashed, I do believe a lot of those normies turned against him. And because they were afraid, because the media was telling them that Trump was terrible and all these people are dying and he's the worst and it was the worst it's ever been. And it's just interesting. COVID continued after he left office, and yet suddenly the media changed the narrative, right? Suddenly it was not that bad and it's okay to reopen because the mission was accomplished. They got rid of their guy. They got rid of the guy they hated. Orange man bad.
Well, mainstream media is clearly, it's a joke. It's
the legacy media. The
legacy media. And it's like what? The same 6 corporations own all of the and guess what? Most of those corporations are multinational and they have a lot of business in China. That's why you never see movies. That's why you never see movies made where China's the villain, really. It's usually the Russians who are the villain. Right. Remember 24? I love that. Remember that show 24? I love that show 24. They were the only show I can remember that legitimately had in 2 seasons a Chinese villain. And they got a lot of flack for it. The new Red Dawn movie that came out like 6 years ago, they had to go back out in post-production and they changed the villains from China to North Korea because the Chinese were threatening to not allow the movie to show in China, and Hollywood is basically bought and paid for by China. The Top Gun movie, Tom Cruise personally made sure that they kept the Taiwan stuff in the movie. And if it wasn't for his star power, Paramount was going to remove the Taiwanese flag on the back of his jacket because the Chinese were threatening to not view the movie in China, which is a huge market for Hollywood. So, it's crazy the way that we've been compromised.
So can I ask you guys, I know we're at a point where we could maybe talk about that. Can I ask you guys, all 3 of you guys, I've been researching you guys all week. This has been very informative to me. I got a couple questions I want to ask you guys, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay, like but first off, I know that me and Anthony know each other. Sean, my name is Nick Driverman. I'm a American singer-songwriter. I love folk music. I love rock music. I like to wild out. Yo, Mr. Brandon, can I tell you something? You are so like smart. You're blowing my mind right here. I'm having to like, I'm like, damn. I might have to go back and look at this podcast like 15 times to understand everything you're saying, because
Thank you.
You're definitely a just a vast wealth of knowledge.
Well, you're very kind.
But I got something. I was researching you too, so I'm gonna start with you. Are you ready?
Okay, with me.
Yeah.
Okay, lay it on me.
Okay, so I was researching you a little bit, and I had to make my notes here, man. I'm sorry, I'm not.
That's fine.
Legacy media yet. So, okay, so a lot of people would argue that Rush Limbaugh is the greatest talk show host of all time.
Yeah.
A lot of people would argue that he is the dude that almost is the grandfather of what we're all doing now, podcasting.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, he talked about you in a article that ran in the American Spectator.
Yeah. It was actually the high point of my career was when he
and he said a whole bunch of great things, and I can't read my handwriting, but I did listen to the video. My question here is, will you tell me, Anthony and Sean, how that felt when you actually heard somebody of that stature going, yo, Brandon?
It was so I grew up I was what you would call a Rush baby. I grew up, my dad used to pipe Rush Limbaugh into the nursery. My dad was a truck driver for Miller Lite. He used to deliver beers, and he had other jobs too, but he fell in love with Rush because his boss made all the drivers at Miller listen to Rush Limbaugh. And my dad, who was completely apolitical, in fact, my dad was a liberal, completely apolitical, really, though.
He'd probably be a Republican by today's standards.
Well, he is today. But he fell in love with listening to Limbaugh. And so he used to like play it in the house. He like became like an addict, and he would play it. And so I just grew up with always knowing Rush Limbaugh, always having that voice. I just recognize it. So, I know a lot of people hated him, and he was certainly a controversial guy, but that's why he was so great, though, because
that was cool.
That's why, I mean, look, guys don't get to that level by being, kind of boring. They get there by being entertaining, and he was entertaining. And so I was actually, I'll never forget it. It was, I had just come back I was with my kids at the park, and I live in Florida. So
hey, Brandon, I can see you getting emotional, and tell us how you feel, because I'm gonna tell you something. This is big for you, because
it was huge.
One of my musical heroes was like, yo, Nick.
It was huge.
I would lose my mind.
And so like I was with the kids. It was like a day off for me, and I came back and I'm covered in sweat. And so I told my wife, I'm gonna take a shower. So I had the radio on as I was taking a shower, and I'm getting out of the shower, and all of a sudden I hear my name coming out of the, I guess it was the iPhone I had. I was streaming it. Brandon Weicker, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And so he starts reading my article. And my phone just starts going crazy from people I knew in DC, and my buddies in Chicago, and they're like, bro, what's going on? You're all over the place. And like, then all of a sudden it's like Ricochet is carrying the piece, and my piece that I wrote that he references going viral. I've got like 1 million clicks or something on it. It's like, the editors at American Spectator are like, they're sending me, thank you for writing this. This is amazing. It's huge for the site. And I just was like, I'm standing there in my towel like an idiot. I'm like, I cannot believe that this is, I want to, Did it
feel surreal? Did it feel surreal?
It was completely surreal. I mean, I've been on TV before. I've been on with Maria Bartiromo, and she's great. But like Rush Limbaugh was like, he's like the king.
Yo, that's the Maria, Maria badass. But that's next level.
But he's like, and then he died shortly after that. So I feel like I got lucky because about 5 months later he was dead. I communicated with his brother David. I reached out to him randomly. I don't know him, but we were friends on Twitter. And when he died, I said, it was truly, and I've done a lot in my life. I've done a lot of interesting, wild things. I said, but it was truly the highlight of my career so far was when Rush spent 3 minutes on air, October of 2019, reading and commenting favorably on a piece that I wrote.
That's cool,
I still get a little it was wild. It was wild because he's the king. I mean, we will never have somebody, whether you hate him or not. You love him or hate him or whatever. Like, we will never have somebody that. I mean, he made AM cool. Like, who could do that? Like, that's like really amazing.
Rush Limbaugh. That's it, man.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm gonna go. If it's okay, Anthony, is it okay if I go to Sean?
Okay. Yeah.
So Sean, I knew I was gonna come on this podcast with you three beautiful men, man. And I was like this. I was like, yo, I gotta research them. I gotta do my deep dive on them and understand it.
Sounds good.
I want to mention something to you, Sean. I had been a fan from afar. I live in North Carolina. Me and you actually possibly played a show together in Greensboro, North Carolina at Ace's Basement. I'm talking about early 2000s.
Nice.
Okay. Spitalfield. You guys, we were opening up. I was in a rapcore band that was kind of about to end. I tell you something, man. I remember seeing you guys perform, and I remember going, "Whoa, yo, I don't think that's
Thank
negative."
You, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I remember like, yo, because it's just different. You see different people from different. When you're an artist, you see different people from different walks of life. And I was like, yo, not you, but just your band. It was different than what we were doing. And I just thought it's very cool. So I deep dived on you too, sir.
I appreciate that, man.
And I got a question. I got a question for you. You probably never had. You ready for this?
Sure.
Now, a lot of people might not know this about you, Sean, but you ready? You had a group called Wood Fire Brigade.
World Fire Brigade. Yes, sir.
Sorry about that. World Fire?
Wood Fire Brigade is probably better.
Yeah. Wood. I'm from the South. I say wood like world. WOOD.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Sorry.
Well, I'm from the South. My bad. Now Brett Scallion's from freaking Fuels in this group with you, right?
Yeah, he was.
Now, you got to tell me about this because I'm interested in this shit.
It was.
This had to be something that was cool, and then it went like, oh no, fast.
Well, okay, so Brett and I and our producer friend Eddie formed. We just started kind of messing around with songs together and recording in between.
Now you say. Now I'm going to ask you this. When you say we were messing around with stuff, like, will you give me the context of what you guys were doing? Because I am a songwriter, and I want to know, like, why were you and him in the studio together?
We were all friends, so we were just getting together and working on a project that we didn't know what it would become, just to do it. And so we were writing these songs and recording them. We ended up making a rock record essentially. And we signed a record deal with Frostbite Media, which was a new label at the time under E1, which is like the biggest independent label out there.
Huge. That's a huge label.
Yeah, E1. And we were on E1 at the time. And so World Fire Brigade signed this deal with a subsidiary of them that was supposed to be a new good label, and then they just immediately folded as a label. within months of us signing with them, and the record came out, but they just completely flopped it out with zero promotion. And because of my band and Brett doing Fuel and Eddie, all his production.
Now was he still doing Fuel while you and him were rocking with that project? Like,
yeah. He well, we met a long time ago because we toured with Fuel in 2003 on their Natural Selection tour. And
you know what's crazy? You know what's crazy about you guys' music? I'll tell you this because I never looked at you guys. I read over your Wikipedia page before we're doing this, and I'm researching all of you guys. I know Anthony because I'm a fan of Anthony's like comedy, and I think he's freaking hilarious. But I had to look up Brandon. I had to look at Sean. I know who you were, but I had to go back and look. And I was like, yo, I used to jam some of those songs out. Like the Smile Empty Soul stuff, when I was like riding around chilling, trying to bang out chicks, I was like, yo, we got to put this song on. You know what I'm saying? So you helped me out a lot with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, so
glad to hear, man. Glad to hear.
But you also worked with Brad Stewart, who was with Sean Down.
I mean, we're friends, but I didn't actually work with Brad on anything I can remember. Okay. Although he's coming on the show, I was
just going off. I was looking at your Wikipedia page, and I was like, "Yo, I'm trying to piece it together." Sean Down's a great band. I was just asking you, like, what's the relationship
with
Brad?
With Brad?
Yeah.
Well, us and Shinedown, their first record came out the same day that our first record came out, and we were essentially on the same label, and we just ended up playing a lot of radio festivals together back in the day, and even some club dates here and there. We just did a lot of shows together, so we were all friends. And Brad ended up, I think he only played with them for their first 2 albums, and then he ended up splitting up with the band, and he actually joined up with Brett and played for Fuel for a little bit, and then that ended up not working out, and he actually has been in that band Saliva now for the last 8 years.
Now, I was reading it, and there's one thing me and you have in common. We're lifers when it comes to music.
Yeah.
You are probably the happiest. Yeah, I actually was like, oh, I got to get my words right here. I got it. I've gone through 25 band members, 25 or 30 band members. Okay, now most people would look at this and go, whoa, what's going on with you? Sean, how many band members have you gone through?
Let's see.
Yo, my man can't even count it.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the teens somewhere. If I had to just guess.
So what do you think contributes to maybe me and you as artists, as musicians, not being able to keep band members?
Well, this is the music world these days is tough, as you know. And so a lot of people, this situation or that situation brings them to the end of the road for them, And so of all the band members, the past band members in Smile Empty Soul, there are almost none that ended in some sort of like conflict or disagreement. It was all just stuff like, oh man, I can't do it anymore. I've got, my wife's going to give birth to our child, or I've got this new career opportunity. And those are the scenarios for me, that have lost me band members.
I was making my notes here. I got a question for you. You got a song called All You Know.
I don't think I do.
It's on there.
Wait, no. In World Fire Brigade. You're right.
You do.
Yeah.
See, I'm teaching him about his own self. I was like, here we go. So I listened to that song, and here's my question: why is that? And I know me and you actually are joking right now because I'm actually going to prove your point too. And me and you are joking. Why is that the only song from that record that we can find online?
Because that record company that I was just telling you about that folded. When they folded, you can't get a hold of them. Okay. Nobody knows anything. It's just the weirdest thing. They all vanished, and their distribution on that record has expired, and it's been pulled down from all of the different platforms. And we literally we can't release it ourselves without a release from them, and we don't even know how to get a hold of them. So it's just kind of like one of those stuck in limbo scenarios that we're working on. But
I'm gonna give a shout out to Motel. I'm gonna tell you something. I googled this record. That's the only record that I'm in where I'm at that I can even see that exists. But clearly it does exist because you can get it on iTunes and you can do it on other platforms.
You can get that one song on iTunes?
Yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't even know that.
Someone's just selling your music, dog. That's crazy.
Hey man, if you need a dog, man, I got you. So Ant, I got some questions for you, Anthony.
Okay.
Now me and you, we first met. Sometimes I drink a little too much. Let's keep it 100. But at most time, here's the thing. Me and Anthony met, if I'm not mistaken, in Durham, North Carolina at Duke Coffee House.
Yeah, Duke University's like coffee house. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about what your mindset was going into that show, you doing what you were doing, where you were at that moment in time. What's happening?
Wait, what? What was the question?
Oh, yeah. So I probably asked too many questions.
No, I just didn't understand it. You're probably fine. I just didn't understand. What was the
sorry. That night, Duke Coffee House shows happening. To you, it's probably just another show. To me, it might be that too. But me and you, we slap hands. We hit it off. We're still friends to this day. When you go into a show, what are you thinking? Like, what do you expect certain things? You go, hey, what's your thought process?
It depends on the show, man. I don't know. Like lately, it's like I want to go home. I'm like, I hope. I'm like, but I mean, in the beginning, it was like, this is fun, And then like, I mean, it's still fun, but it's like I just want to fucking chill out too. I've been like, I don't know. The Duke thing was cool to me because I couldn't even fucking probably get into that college at that time, and I booked a music show there, and my job used to be even lazier. I wouldn't even have to do comedy. I'd have to just promote everything or book everything. I'd have to book everything, and then I would just like chill out. And you were blowing up on like a bunch of shit at the time too. I remember that, and like yeah, I don't know, man. That was a fun time. Like Tucker Max went there, and I just read some book he wrote at the time too. I was like whatever, and then like so I booked a show at Duke University for fun. I think if that's what you're asking me.
I do, but I'm gonna tell you something, man. I also deep dive on you too, man. I'm gonna tell you something that's crazy. One of my favorite shows growing up was the Power Rangers.
Yeah.
And one of the Power Rangers leaders is a fan of yours.
Who's
Zordon.
that? Oh yeah, I had him on the show. Yeah.
Just want to give you props, man. Yo, if Zordon's a fan of Anthony Rogers, yo, I'm always gonna be.
I thought there was a question coming. It's just wanted to give you props, dude.
Yeah, that's just how I am. But
no, the fact you have the bowl cut, like I was like a fact with a bowl cut. And I watched this show, and hearing that sentence is hilarious to me. It's just fucking funny. I don't know. It's just like fucking funny, man. I love that shit as a kid too, man. I was a fucking fat kid that loved the Power Rangers, man.
Me too.
Love that shit, dude.
Hey, yo, Brandon. Yeah. Hey, yo, Brandon.
Yeah.
Brandon.
Yeah.
Are you let's say me and you, Anthony and Sean, we all hanging out one night.
Yeah.
What kind of alcohol you drinking?
Well, I like Saddam Hussein's drink of choice. That would be Johnny Walker Black.
I'm gonna tell you something. That's a good drink.
Saddam.
It is. I get made fun of a lot by my friends because they.
How you get made fun
malt.
of Johnny
Because
Walker
they like
Black?
the
That's
single. They
badass.
like the single malt, and that I like what Saddam had. I like what Christopher Hitchens used to drink, and that was
What's he
Black.
drink?
Johnny Walker Black. That was he said it was the finest, and I agree, the finest blended Scotch whiskey you will ever have. I think it is, and it's affordable too. It's everything you could need. You know.
Do you Anthony?
Yeah.
You play chess or checkers?
Chess.
Sean, chess or checkers?
Chess.
Brandon, chess or checkers?
I like chess, but my kids make me play checkers, so you know.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw this out there. All three of you guys chime in on this. I looked up how to beat because I'm a competitive person. Okay. So I'm like, okay, how do I beat everybody at checkers? Because I play chess. I love chess. But how do I beat everybody at checkers all the time?
Stack up them
You
kings.
just gotta say hard right
stack
or
up those
hard
kings.
left the whole time. Is
Just
that true?
You stack up the kings. Don't move your back row. Stack up the kings. That's how you do it.
I like what Ann's saying.
Bam.
Have you guys?
I let my kids win, so I don't even remember, to be honest with you. I don't let my kids.
Hey, Brandon,
win.
Brandon, you got to start beating them soon. They're gonna get old.
Believe me, I know. Well, so we also play. I have two daughters, and believe it or not, they like the game Risk. So we've been playing a lot of Risk. And
is Risk a core game? Is that a core game?
It's like a board game, and it's and I do not hold back on my oldest because she's very competitive. And she'll if she wins, she'll get in my face, and she'll start making fun of me. My 8-year-old will. So lately I've been like, all right, you know what? No more Mr. Nice Guy. I'm going to show you how we do it. And so, but I used to let them win a lot. So
Risk is a great game. I love that game.
Oh, it's phenomenal. I love it. Yeah, it's great.
So Sean, when you were playing out doing shows
last week,
what's the best you ever felt? What's the best you ever felt?
Oh, dude, I don't even know how to answer that. I mean, funnest show?
No. What's the best you ever felt? Because sometimes I felt good. I've done stuff with Bieber and bigger people, but you know what? I always feel like this.
You did something with Bieber? Is that
There's just so much stuff going on, and you can't enjoy it.
Hey, 1 second, hang on. You did a song with Justin Bieber? Is that what you said?
Nah, but I played an American Music Festival where we opened up.
That's crazy.
And I'm gonna tell you something. 50,000 people, and I'm gonna tell you something. Wow. When you open up a show like that, I can't explain this to people in regular terms. It's because first thing is you're dependent on your own fingers to move in the right direction. You're thinking your mind's going to do this. You're doing this. You're in front of this many people. Nothing prepares you for this. And I'm sure Sean knows this because Sean has played in front of huge crowds. And nothing prepares you for it.
Practice.
Yeah.
That's the best preparation.
Hey, practice and look down.
Muscle memory at that point takes over. You just rather than you just have to rely on the fact you've done it a million times before.
That's what comedy feels like too. It's 5 minutes before I'm like, I have no clue what I'm even going to talk about, and then they call you up there. I'm like, oh yeah, I do this every fucking day. I do this several times a week. I'm like, oh yeah, every single time I forget because I'm probably so fucking stoned that I forget that I'm it's so easy. And then as soon as they call me, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just bullshit my way through it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is easy.
Yo, Anthony, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay, I use a little dry humor in my shows. I'm clearly not a comedic genius you are, but I will talk.
I'm playing bars and girls, bro. I appreciate it, man, but I'm playing bars.
I will talk. Yeah, you know what? You're actually one of my favorite dudes. Okay, I'm not just saying that. I love it. So give you mad props. Here's my question. I have no problem when I'm playing guitar and singing to a crowd. It's the intervals. It's the in between. It's the, yo, I got to talk to him and do this. I got to do this. You are someone that has to make jokes out of something. And I would look at it and go like what Brandon was talking about earlier. I mean, if you make the wrong joke, you're under fire, right?
I've had like someone try to like throw beer on me one time. I'm also like 6 foot tall though, you know. Like so, it's like I mean, a dude probably wouldn't do anything unless I like really disrespected him or something.
I mean, you look like a good sized guy right there. We all look like pretty damn good.
Well, this girl threw a beer at me one time. As I said, it was like a Mother's Day, like 5 years ago, and I was like, Happy Mother's Day, you whores, like just fucking with them. And then then like they got like all pissed, and she like fucking threw a drink on me or something, and I just made fun of her for the next 20 minutes. I just turned it into like a roast her festival, and then fucking just like made fun of her while people just brought me drinks the whole time.
That's cool, man.
No, did she stay for the whole show?
Yeah,
I mean, for the whole
show. Yeah, I made fun of the. I was like, thanks for the badass security here. I appreciate being protected from the crazy people.
That was funny.
And then I just made fun of her shoes and her phone screen and just fucking how if you have to like tell me at the front of the show that you're not a whore, you're probably a whore. I'm just like, I mean, if you have to like yell at me about how you're not a whore, you're probably a whore. And I just like went off on her for like 30 minutes about this kind of shit. And then like got paid for it still. I mean, it's fucking. That's what doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense as a job mostly. I tell Shauna like every day. I'm like, I have no idea how this is a job, but it is somehow.
It's America, man.
Yeah, I just run with it. It's like, all right, I'll just keep fucking talking. You guys
I think we all hit that nail on the head right there. Is, you know, we all from different walks of life, and we all do different things. But I'm gonna tell you something, man. I like to be honest with people. I was very nervous coming into this podcast tonight, and I'm gonna tell you why. We got Brandon, we got Sean, we got Anthony. I'm good in my region. When I play shows, nobody touched me. Like I'm like, I used to battle rap people. I used to do all that stuff. If I'm playing an acoustic show,
you and Brandon battle rap. You and Brandon should battle rap.
I would love to battle rap. Yo, me and Brandon, we would battle rap each other. No, but the thing I look at is, you know, I was nervous, man, and like coming into this tonight, I was like, man, you know, we got Brandon Wyckoff, we got Sean Danielsen, we got Anthony Rogers. Yo, I'm little ass Nick Driver from fucking Zebulon. I'm like, I know I'm a killer. I know I have my own thoughts, but I don't want to overtalk people. I don't want to be disrespectful. I want to be a person that helps out. And you know, tell you something, man. You guys are very wonderful.
Well, you too, brother, man.
Well, thank you. Likewise.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know what, Brandon, you the man.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I think you're pretty great too. I didn't know that you performed in front of that many people. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
I think the most I've ever spoken to, I think was probably like, I think at most 1,200, and I thought that was a lot.
Yeah, but you want. I researched you too. You've been on Fox News Network.
Yeah. But I don't see them.
Well, what did that feel?
I don't
like?
see, but I don't see them though. Like if I saw like 50,000 people staring back at me, I don't know.
I'm gonna tell you something, man. It makes you go like this. I know Sean knows this, but the first couple of times I went out into the big crowds, like the crowds that's like over 3,000, 4,000 people. The first time you walk out, you're like, it's like your eyes don't adjust right.
Yeah.
And it's like you get a little dizzy and you're like, ew.
Yeah.
That was just my experience.
I'd be like,
yeah, I mean,
off the crowd if I had that many people. I'm like, all these 50,000 people. I'm like, throw a joint up here, guys. Yeah, thanks.
I guess it's so big it becomes impersonal at some point. I guess because like I know that. Yeah.
They all become one, and you're just playing for them.
Yeah, because like a lot of the audiences I'm speaking to for the
that's
military,
good point, Sean. That's a good point.
Yeah, because like a lot of the audiences I speak to nowadays, like I used to do stuff like until 2018. My big lectures were normally with either like academic institutions or with Silicon Valley businesses. And then that sort of went away, and then I ended up falling in with the military. And they tend to want to have small groups. So like maybe 60 3 and 4 star generals. Of course, it's crazy though, because, I walk in and there are these like 3 and 4 star generals, and I have to basically not look like an idiot because, they have all the access. But I get nervous. Like I get real nervous before even more so than when I have a bigger crowd. So I guess it is more important, because when I have a bigger crowd, I get nervous and then I quickly fall, like you said, muscle memory. I know what I'm doing. But when I'm in a small conference room or a lecture hall, I got like maybe 60 people and they're looking to cut me apart. In fact, it's usually they want to cut me apart. So like that gets
extra pressure.
Yeah, because it's more intimate. It's more intimate.
I had to do debates. I ran for Congress, and like I had to do debates and shit.
Really?
And that was so much easier than like comedy was, because I feel like I just ate him alive. Basically, I felt like, dude, you know what I mean? Because it was like the difference between like a bar that no one fucking cares you're there. It says like Taco Tuesday on the sign instead of your name. You know what I mean? Like doing a bar like that, like in like 2014 and shit, was like way harder than like politics ever was. Of course, I felt like it.
You're right.
Yeah.
And like,
how many votes?
When you first start out, that shit was cool. What'd you say, Sean? Sorry.
How many votes did you get again, dude? You got a lot of votes, didn't you?
60,000 votes. Yeah, 60,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what I didn't know this about you. What office? What office did you run for?
If I'd have been up there, you'd have got 60,001.
What office did you run for?
U.S. Congress against Cory Bush. I was a Republican nominee.
Okay. I remember this. Yeah, wow, Cory Bush. Yeah, that's why I used to work on campaigns in my 20s. I did some stuff for campaigns. So that's that whole system is so intense, though.
Yeah, I lost all my own, man. It was a excruciating waste of $14. You know, it was a tough campaign. No, I just thought the world was ending, and I was trying to get that fucking law writing pen, bro. Because like I was like, what the fuck? They're just shutting down my cities. You know what I mean? I'm just like, no. Yeah. I'm like, no. And I tried to get that pen, and they gave it to some illiterate person. Like, it's crazy. No, politics is weird, man. Like, I know a lot of people in politics. I'm just not really in. I lost, so I'm not one of them. But yeah, no, it was a fun time.
No, it's fun. I write about it occasionally, and I interact with it, but it's very cutthroat. I mean, it's very depressing too, because then you see the people who win, and they're not always the best.
Yo, Sean, it's just, hey, Brandon, it's just like politics.
Yeah.
Yo, I didn't know. I went back and looked at Smile Empty Soul's music, and I'm watching like Sean's stuff, and I'm like, when I was coming up, man, I'm gonna tell you, I had a very hard upbringing when it came to music. I was playing acoustic guitar. I was doing this. My first show I ever played was opening up for Korn at the brewery in like 1996, 95.
You opened for Korn? What the fuck?
I'm going to tell you something.
Crazy. That's crazy.
I'm going to tell you something. Got completely blown off the stage. I was like 12, 11 years old.
Wow.
Okay. The guy, Kenny was the owner at the time. He's like, yo, we're going to get Nick up in here, man, because he's going to pull some people in. Okay.
Had a 12-year-old open for Korn.
Okay, here's the thing.
12-year-old with an acoustic guitar.
Here's what happened to me the next 10 years. I'm like, fuck that. We got to get harder with this shit. We're going to start doing electric guitars, heavy drums, and blah. And I'm going to tell you something, man. It's probably the greatest thing that ever happened to me. One of the Korn guys, the head guy, was like so nice.
He's Christian, yeah.
He was like this. He was like, yo, man, come here. I was like, and I'm like looking down. I'm a little freaking kid, man. And I'm not looking down. I'm like, this is bullshit. You know? And I feel like, you ever do something and you're like, that person cheated, but they didn't. They're just better.
You played against Korn in their prime and you were 12. I mean, what do you? I mean, Korn's a fucking. I mean, I liked them as a kid. I'm like an adult now, But I mean, they fucking like I don't know. They fucking killed it, bro. Like I mean, that was their
They killed it.
prime too.
And
They had,
this is
your prime.
This is Korn before they were popular on the mainstream. This is the nastiest version. This is like the nastiest version of Korn. This is like Incubus during the science era. Okay, you do not want to run with these guys. Okay, like you do not want to. And I'm over there.
12. So you're playing the acoustic guitar. They had a 12-year-old on acoustic play open for Korn. Is this?
You know, my mom.
Who booked that?
Feeding them to the sharks, dude.
Yeah, no shit. Who booked you?
I was pulling people in at that point.
That's okay. That's all that matters, really, I guess.
And you know, I guess if you wear Jinkos, you can do whatever you want.
Magical Jinkos.
But I'm gonna tell you, man, it changed my life because everybody, I think every artist, you need to get blown off the stage at least one time.
Oh, I think you should all the time. No, I think you definitely. Yeah, no, that's true.
You know, as a comedian too, Anthony, you can talk to me about this. And Brandon, you and Sean, definitely. Me and Sean, as musicians, we probably share similar. There's certain people you see and you're like, shit. But I'm gonna tell you something. There's never been no bigger disconnect than untrained Nick Driver and Korn in his prime. And I'm gonna tell you something. I literally was like, I came home. And my mom was waiting outside, and I came home. I was like, got in the car. She's like, I'm fine. Came home. And I'm like, I got to put a rock band together because I got to beat these MFers. Like that was my mindset. Like my mindset was this. The only reason I lost was because it was just me versus them. There's 5 of them. Like yo, that was my mindset. I was outnumbered. On top of them all being amazing, beautiful musicians that are top notch, I didn't think about that. I was like this. I lost because I was outnumbered. No, you lost because all of those guys are better than you independently. So, but you look at something like that and you learn and you go, okay, can I reach the level they're gonna get to? I don't know, but let's try. Let's see. Let's see. I don't know if I can be as good as them, but if I work hard enough, if I do this, maybe I can. And that's where
I felt the opposite, man. I felt like at the time when I had nothing going on, I thought I had more going on. I was so egotistical that I had nothing going on. And then as I slowly started having things going on, I'm like, oh, that's weird, you know. I'm like, I'll be on, like, I don't know. I was kind of fucked up on edibles one time, and like Sean had a guy from like 3 doors down on here. I'm like, how the fuck am I out here with like Swalty Soul 3 doors down right now? I was like, this is fucking crazy. And, like, I mean, I'll be in the same thing. Like, I'll look back at that and just think that way sometimes, man. Like, so I definitely understand that. But I mean, but if you asked me at 19, I'd be like, duh, it's gonna happen. You mean I was such a fucking prick with no accomplishments at 19, right? I just had such an ego for no reason, and then now I'm just like, it's happening now. I'm in the middle of like all this cool shit, and I'm like, oh, that's still going on, cool. I'm like surprised by it still. I'm like, oh wow, that's fun, you know.
But you know, Anthony, you're a go-getter. You're a winner. You like going out there. You're like, and I know you don't take compliments very well, but I want to say this: you're a winner. You're a good person. You put a lot of us, like, let's think about it. Like, none of us four would even be talking to each other. We wouldn't know of each other's existence if it weren't for how good you are at what you do. We wouldn't know as much about China if you didn't know me and Sean. We wouldn't have talked tonight. Me and you wouldn't have had a great conversation. Let's also not disrespect how good you are as a person.
I need to talk to my wife. Like, just hit her up and go back. Like, did you know Anthony's the perfect person? Just remind my wife. Like, you guys wingman.
Perfect person, man. It's a perfect person.
Just like, did you know? I'm gonna clip this episode and send it to her. I'm gonna clip this of you saying that and send it to my wife. It's like, don't forget, Gabrielle. Don't forget. Nick Driver sees it, you know. I'll be like,
that's right. Nick Driver says, "Hey, yo, here we go. Let me get 1, 2, 3. Anthony Rogers is the greatest person of all time. Skeet, skeet. There you go. You're gonna take that, and chop it up, man."
So,
well, gentlemen, on that note, I gotta
Yeah.
get out of here.
Yeah,
Me too.
it's
Me too.
11:47 here, so I gotta
Hey, yo,
gotta go to
Brandon,
bed.
Brandon,
Yeah.
Sean, Anthony, thank you guys. Thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
for
It was
allowing-
real fun. We should do
Thank
this
you guys
again.
for allowing me to be a part of this, and
Yeah,
I learned
yeah.
a lot tonight. And I tell you guys something else. I just very much appreciate being a part of this, and thank you.
Yeah, same here. Thank you. That was real fun, and stay in touch. Let's do this again.
no, definitely. And hey, Nick, do you want to play a
Absolutely,
song?
gentlemen.
I'll see you guys later. Hey, Nick, do you want to play a song after they get out of here? Before we get out of
Yes,
here?
sir.
Are you playing an acoustic song if you want before I get out of here too? You guys can you guys can go fucking do.
Yeah, we'll go ahead. We'll go ahead. We'll cut out. We'll cut out, man. You guys have a good night.
All right, boys.
All right, what? Why is it taping me so?
You good person, man. You good person.
Bam. All right, yeah, you want to play a song, Soul? Is it cutting out or something? What the fuck's going on?